little cleanup before we get to the hysterics of what happened down there at the border. Well, not quite. At El Paso, in that cushy city, where Kamala Harris and a couple of Democrat idiots gave a little press conference on the tarmac and then summarily turned right the fuck back around and headed back to Washington because the weekend's coming up. But, yeah, Kevin McCarthy. I literally said this yesterday, 100%, and it was a fucking bait and switch, okay? They had that infrastructure bill, they had all that bipartisan support for it, and they were going to spend $500 and some odd billion out there on actual infrastructure. And then with the other hand, while you aren't paying attention, guess what? We're just going to cram through the rest of our fucking social policies and call it infrastructure through the Kirsten Gillibrand flavor of everything is infrastructure. But let's get through what Kevin McCarthy has to say. And I'm kind of also a little bit disappointed, not because I came up with a very obvious observation on this situation, but because I'm thinking along the same lines as Kevin McCarthy, heaven help me. So he calls out Biden for partisan tandem infrastructure plan disingenuous in every shape and form. House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy on Friday sent a strong signal to President Joe Biden that his demands to tie a multi-trillion-dollar reconciliation package to the bipartisan infrastructure deal has very little chance of passing the House of Representatives. Why is that, Kev? I think my members need a chiropractor because they got whiplash after watching the president yesterday say that there was a deal and say that there was no deal. Oh! Fuck, got him! Say you can have a deal on the $1 trillion of infrastructure, but you've got to vote for $5 trillion at the same time too, and you've got to raise taxes on everyone, and you've got to have a Green New Deal, McCarthy said in a press conference. Hey, got a little bit more colorful than even I did, but hey, good on him. Perhaps he's picking up a point or two. I don't think that's going to work. I don't think it's going to pass. I think they killed any opportunity. I think it's disingenuous in every shape and form, the House Republican leader added. Why does he think that? It's interesting. On Thursday, Biden endorsed the bipartisan framework negotiated by 10 senators and supported by at least 20 senators across both parties, telling reporters outside the White House that we have a deal, while Kamala lurked in the background like a total fucking creep. Yeah, like it says here, spearheaded by Rob Portman, Rhino, and Kirsten Sinema, socialist. She used to hold, I'm not using this as just like your standard neocon slur. She held membership for the Arizona Communist or Socialist Party. Same deal. Dedicated $550 billion for new spending on roads, bridges, and other infrastructure projects. Yeah, and a few billion when we're dealing with numbers this large, why does it even matter to be specific? On power grid and water and wastewater upgrades. It's good stuff, but that's where the spending for infrastructure should end. No one got everything they wanted in the package, Sinema said. Yes, she didn't get her allocations of box wine. We all gave some to get some, as she said, staring at Tim Scott's crotch. Later Thursday, Biden pledged that he would oppose the infrastructure deal unless a separate budget reconciliation package was to be brought to his desk as well, saying both bills must be approved in tandem. Ah, okay, that's why. Okay, that's why it's not going to pass. I just figured it would have been, one of these big spending bills. It's normally just a simple majority, and because the Democrats legitimately got elected to hold both the Senate and the House of Representatives as well as the president, it should just be a straightforward done deal. There should be no negotiations on this, but that's why it's going to be dead on arrival, because they've made a distinction here. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, we're going to have infrastructure, but everything else that we want is going to be in this separate bill that we'll just push along at the same time. So if that one doesn't come along with it, it's more or less just making some more paperwork in order to accomplish the same goals. So that's why it's going to end up dead on arrival. That I understand. But let's get to the heart of the matter, shall we? Vice President Harris arrives at El Paso Border Patrol Station amid bipartisan pressure. If she was actually going to take the whole border crisis seriously, she wouldn't have went to El Paso. She would have went to the southern tip, much closer to Mexico City in proximity to the border itself. It went down on the southernmost tip instead of on the far western part, nearly in New Mexico, the city of El Paso, Texas, when she just paid lip service. It was clearly just a slap-together press conference. That was definitely spurned out of her goodwill and taking her job seriously about addressing the crisis that's going on at the border. But it's not quite a crisis, right? They've made leaps and bounds of improvement. At least that's what Harris is trying to push. So she was down there today and visited a border station in El Paso, Texas, and made a criticism that she hasn't visited the border since she was tapped months ago by literally everybody in Washington. Oh, I'm sorry, President Joe Biden to lead his administration's efforts on immigration. When she arrived in El Paso, Harris was questioned by a Fox News reporter, fake news, faux news, man, about the timing of her trip. It's not my first trip. Ha 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 ha. I've been to the border many times. Ha 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 ha. But never in this capacity, especially when it was her specific responsibility. But hey, Kamala's gonna Kamala, right? Because as I've long said, I said back in March I was going to come to the border, so this is not a new plan. No, it was just never scheduled, and it was only penciled in after Trump made his announcement that he's going to be taking Greg Abbott up on his offer to come down and tour the border with a bunch of other Republican policymakers. It'll be interesting to see if any Democrats make the trip along with Trump, because Harris brought some people along, and we'll get to what one of the idiots that she brought along had to say. But yeah, they finish her statement. But the reality is we have to deal with the causes and we have to deal with the effects. Okay, you can still do all that stuff, but at the same time, close the fucking border. Okay? Finish the wall, get the security underway. These two things are not diametrically opposed to one another, okay? You can deal with the underlying causes, but at the same time, if somebody's bleeding out, you want to put compression on the wound, don't you? Then you can deal with everything else. Fucking dolt. She's the vice president, but it's not the dumbest thing to come out of that administration today, or at least in the last 24 hours. Weeks ago, the vice president made trips to Mexico and Guatemala, so she's been to the border. She just crossed it in Air Force Two, triggering more scorn from Republicans who have said that she's not handling the surge of illegal immigration along the U.S.-Mexico border. Some GOP lawmakers and Representative Henry Cuellar, he was the guy who was making a whole bunch of stink about the conditions that the migrants are being kept in right there at the border. He was sounding a lot more like the border hawk that he would have had to campaign as in order to get elected, and seemed like he's got his head on the level, at least when put in contrast with other Democrats in the House right now. I'll be interested to see if he ends up making the trip down with Trump and then the other GOP lawmakers that are there, because this is his district. This is what the people in his congressional district care about. And I think border security, this word has been thrown around a lot, is a bipartisan issue, a legitimate one, not some sort of sneaky smoke signal infrastructure plan. But yeah, Cuellar meanwhile argued that Harris should visit the Del Rio border area, where illegal immigration has surged, instead of El Paso, which is hundreds of miles away. That's exactly why I said that this was going to be a totally nothing trip. She's not even going to the epicenter of the problem. She's not even going to one of the biggest problem areas. Oh yeah, there's a facility there, but that's where they go after they get processed once they've been caught at the Del Rio border, if they do in fact get caught. But I guess 118,000 people have been caught, but no, they're making progress, leaps and bounds of it. And being in Guatemala, this is Harris once again, and being in Mexico, talking with Mexico. It's normally what you do when you're in Mexico. Thanks for being specific. Even when I'm just reading the transcript, I can clearly see that you're nervous. As a partner, frankly, on this issue, I was addressing the causes and coming to the border at the advice and the invitation of a Representative Veronica Escobar. Is about looking at the effects of what has been happening in Central America. That's a perfect segue into what this fucking dipshit had to say. Apparently, El Paso, Texas is the new Ellis Island. What? I read this headline. I didn't know what the fuck to say about it. All I knew is somebody was going to say something atrociously dim, and it looks like Escobar really stepped in it. Let's see the gold medal winning mental gymnastics to pull this one off. El Paso, Texas is the new Ellis Island, Representative Veronica Escobar told Vice President Kamala Harris as Harris arrived for her border visit. Welcome to El Paso. Welcome to my community. Welcome to the new Ellis Island, to the capital of the border. Not even where all the activity is happening. Listen, I have a very, very small amount of information on Ellis Island, but it was one of the, if not the major stopping points for the sanctioned boats that came across in order to be documented before the legal immigration was conducted. Okay? You can kind of make the claim that El Paso is serving the same purpose as Ellis Island, but you're leaving out several big details, and if you just want to apply my themes on it, then yeah, fine, you can make it work, but I ain't buying what you're selling, bitch. Ellis Island was used as a reception center for millions of legal immigrants beginning in 1892 when Joe Biden was first elected to the Senate, but Congress sharply reduced immigration in 24 and 25, and the island facility was closed in 1954 when immigrants comprised only about 1 in 14 Americans. Oh yeah, so I'm sure the demographics are going to be very similar between the numbers in 54 and modern day 19. Reading too many 19s. 2021. In the low immigration years of World War II, Americans' living standards, wages, and productivity rose hand in hand, and the post-war wealth was widely shared around the nation because job-creating investments flowed into poor heartland states. Companies brought labor-saving machines to help Americans get more work done each day, and Americans moved from the poor areas to the booming cities. Exactly. Oh, a little trip down memory lane as to why the Bush family sucks. But in 1965, Congress reopened the doors to mass migration. Then, in 1990, good year, bad president, George H.W. Bush, the establishment wing of the GOP, and the Democrats doubled immigration rates to roughly 1 million per year. President Joe Biden's deputies are now trying to push immigration far above the 1 million per year number by widening many side doors for poor, government-dependent migrants to enter the southern border. Yes, of course. But don't ask him to detail his policy, Biden specifically. I'm sure his deputies are probably fine and coherent because according to Joe Biden, all Latinos are deportable. Based. He suggested Thursday that all Americans with Latino ancestors are illegal immigrants. In a colossally terrible take. This is a part of the whole whisper press conference. That fucking guy is a creep on so many levels. It's awful hard as well to get, I'm not saying that, Latinos vaccinated as well. Why? Why, Joe? Are they not as smart and talented as poor white kids? Migrants aren't? Like, come on, what are you going to do? You're going to drop another nugget of wisdom? They're worried that they'll be vaccinated and deported. I don't think that's one of their major concerns, but okay. He said on June 24th at a pro-vaccination event in North Carolina, Biden was born in 1942 when about only 8% of Americans were immigrants. But I grew up in a black neighborhood and Corn Pop was a bad dude. This is racist as fuck, responded Matthew Culkin, an immigration lawyer in Buffalo, New York. It presumes that if you have brown skin, you necessarily violated U.S. immigration law, he added. Yeah, exactly. He's just lumping in everybody who's Latino. It's like, oh no, they don't want to get vaccinated because they also don't want to get deported. You, my friend, are fucking retarded. But I don't think we're breaking any new ground on this one. We all know that the chickens have left the proverbial roost, and unfortunately they left their down on his scalp. What a colossally hot take. Like I've said before, I think Joe Biden would be a total pisser to hang out with, you know, just shoot the shit with, because you never know what the fuck he'd say, what's just lurking millimeters under the surface. But unfortunately, we're not done with the Biden administration because they've made another colossal play. Okay, so Joe Biden had a really memeable press conference yesterday. Harris was down there at the border paying lip service, which is something that she's incredibly good at and a reason why she is the vice president after all. Only to do this under the cover of, well, relative night, or as much shade as a 5'2" geriatric manlet can cast. Department of Justice sues Georgia over Election Integrity Act. They weren't going to go away without a fight, okay? And I don't know what they're necessarily suing on, what they think their grounds are going to be, or even if they have standing on this one. It'll be interesting to see. The Department of Justice on Friday filed a lawsuit against Georgia over the state's recently passed election integrity law, announced Attorney General Merrick Garland, who alleges the law is a violation of Federal Voting Rights Act's protection for minority voters. Oh, so they're just suing on racist grounds. Boy, are they going to be 100% disappointed when they realize that around the rest of the country, there's much harsher restrictions than those in which you're suing for. You're just going after the one that's currently in the news cycle right now, still, for whatever reason. You're just trying to strike while the iron is hot. Give it some time and it'll be shoved up your ass. Where we see violations of federal law, we will act. Bruh, you'll just make it up so you can act. said at a press conference on Friday describing the new lawsuit as the first in many steps we are taking to ensure that all eligible voters can cast the vote. Can you point to the part? Can you point to any line there in the election integrity law that was passed in Georgia some months ago that would restrict that? Let's see. DOJ's move is the first federal response to push by Republican-led state legislatures to more regulations around elections, including mandating popular voter ID laws, rule changing around mail-in balloting, enhanced signature verification processes, audits, and more. Democrats, meanwhile, have pushed for sweeping legislation that would attempt to expand voter access while rejecting controls around voter ID, mail-in balloting, and other proposed laws, like what's happening in Illinois. I don't know if we'll cover that whatsoever, but corrupt states do corrupt things, and they're currently neck and neck with California as to heading into the bankruptcy and the collapsed state designation, so I don't really care what they do. During Friday's announcement, Garland appeared to echo rhetoric from Democrats who have been arguing that Georgia's voter laws would violate the rights of black people and other minority groups. Okay, so we can see the Democrats are getting all of their talking points from Twitter, which is normally the greatest place where you can get law advice. We are scrutinizing new laws to seek to curb voter access, and where we see violations in federal law, we will not hesitate to act. Okay, that's a good standard to have. You're just not applying it correctly. We are also scrutinizing current laws and practices in order to determine whether they discriminate against black voters and other voters of color. How about just voters in general? How about that? How about not being racist? That would be a start, but if you're going to be scrutinizing stuff and you're going to be throwing out lawsuits before you can point to anything in there, I don't think that that's the best practice for the top lawyer in the land, but hey, you know what? You got the job because of your, sterling good looks and your sharp wit. Oof. The Attorney General did not provide more details about the claim that the law violates minority groups of rights during the news conference. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, a Republican, previously has categorically denied that the law would imperil minorities' voting rights. It doesn't. It doesn't go nearly far enough to really do anything of substantial change. It doesn't tackle anything when it comes to signature verification. And what was the biggest complaint about this? Oh, you can't hand out water now in line. Okay, it's easily remediable. Don't be 150 feet from the polling station. Don't be affiliated with any campaign. And guess what? You can still hand out water if you're too stupid to bring your own fucking bottle. Christ almighty. We're going to see where this one goes, but again, there's nothing in there that's racist, and this is just another one of these fucking show things that they can do. They can put it out there, oh, look, we're tackling systemic racism, and if we're doing it, that means it's definitely serious, guys. Fuck off, Merrick. But yeah, that's the Biden-Harris administration for the day. I don't know if they're the biggest disaster to come out of today, but it was sure the funniest one, because the rest of them are just kind of depressing, because it just involves people dying and one overdosing and somebody getting sentenced for it, which we'll talk about next. I thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.